Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us every day. Our show has now been extended. We actually picked up Kevin Blanche's slot, so now we are on 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. What I'm doing with this new format is extending a voice for a lot more people since I have 5 days and I'm a lot more flexible with the schedule. I used to have like call-in Fridays that didn't ever seem to really work. So now I'm just giving voice to people, and we're developing ongoing relationships with people on the air that have been activists in various venues. And most specifically, I focus on the nuclear activists. Because really, we are all victims of gaslighting, propaganda. We've seen that in the last, honestly, we've really come full circle with how bad can it get. It's going to get way worse now that we're in the Trump nation. What did we hear Dick Cheney yesterday say that we don't need the news media anymore since Donald Trump tweets. So anyways, today I have with us Heide Lambert, who grew up near Hanford and has been an activist and speaking out. She literally had to move away from Richland. And so I want to join you, Heide. Thank you for joining us on the show. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tongue-tied.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, well, in the past we've been talking about your life and the exposure to nuclear radiation. And in the course of our conversations, I talk a lot about the brainwashing and about the propaganda, because when you were in Richland, you really were not allowed to talk about what you were seeing before your very eyes. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, it's a free country, so we could say whatever we want, but whether or not people will agree with us or have further input was kind of the question. I mean, in Richland, you're talking about a really trained, educated workforce who moves there to work at Hanford. And has done that since the 1950s. I mean, before the 1950s, it was a very, very small population there, and mostly it was tribes that moved through the plateau, through the area, and then you come, to the settlement of Hanford, and those people at the beginning, and actually up until now, a lot of them are veterans, so they would go and serve for our government, so they were, patriotic, and they did their service, and then when they got out, they got a job at Hanford, either in security, or the government would send them to school in nuclear science, and then they would get this great degree, and then they would come and work there at a pretty well-paying job, and economics are pretty easy there. You move there, you get, a 200 or 20,000 square foot house. Excuse me, I do mean that, 20,000 square foot house for less than $1 million. Where anywhere else, you're not going to find anything like that. And it's always been like that. Grand homes, huge homes, every store you can think of, every restaurant you can think of in this tiny, like, oasis in the desert, kind of a little bit like Vegas. And so people move there. They get these beautiful houses. They get every materialistic want they want. They live in this farmland with every food, fresh food you can think of. So people think they have a really good life. So when their kids start piping in and start talking about conspiracies or things, truths they know, it got really controversial really fast. And the first thing that is said is, you don't know what you're talking about, so shut up.
That is exactly what they say. In fact, nuclear physicists said that to me. You need to go back to school and get an education. You barely can talk about this. Yeah,
and they just pull this kind of rank on each other. And then to make it even more convoluted and more difficult is the fact that they were top secret up until 1979. Every file at Hanford was top secret, so you really weren't allowed to even go home and tell your wife what you were doing at work. And so that created this culture, this very secret culture, and kind of a paranoid culture. But everyone also at the same time was very open. It's interesting, but it was very open. Like, none of the houses have fences, and lots of people went to the same schools and school functions. Everybody knew each other. So it kind of gave you this sense of community where everyone knows one another and, like, everyone knows what's going on, but there was no intercommunications about what really was going on. And one of my favorite examples is at Hanford, they have this huge waste facility. I think it's one of the largest waste facilities in the world. And they have these tanks. And when they started Hanford, they didn't, that's where it all started. So they didn't know what they were doing at all. And at first, they would just dig these big trenches in the desert, and they would just throw all the waste in the trenches. And then they started to realize how contaminating and dangerous that was. So then they made tanks, and then those tanks leaked, and then they had double-walled tanks. So this was a big problem, and it was kind of a shame. It was a way, it was proof that they weren't really following through with what the science that they were inventing. And so when people worked out at the tank farms, they would never say, I'm working out at the tank farms. They would say, I'm working out at the farms. I work out at the farm. And I always thought that was really interesting, because this is the heartland of farming. Eastern Washington, you grow wheat, potatoes, onions. It's got some of the largest dairy farms, So for a person to say, well, I work out at the farm, it doesn't tell you anything.
Wow.
And that's kind of the mentality there, is they tell you what you need to know without really telling you anything at all. And people just, they like the paycheck. They just keep going back for the paycheck,
Well, and the death is not quick. I mean, we read last week on this show, I was reading about Hanford. I didn't have anybody to interview, so I just went to the websites. Like Donna Gilmore says, you don't have to make stories up. Just go to the government websites. On the the Washington State Ecology Department website, it literally said 67 tanks have spilled 1 million gallons of radioactive waste in the past. That alone is a catastrophe.
Oh, totally. But because it was invented here, it's not an accident. It's not like Fukushima, where there was an earthquake and there was all these causes and effects, and you had this gigantic accident. It's not like 3 Mile Island, where there was this accident, or Chernobyl. It's not a meltdown. It's none of those things. It's just blind waste. It was just complete ignorance. It's about a history of ignorance. And to me, that is the most important lesson that we need to learn from Hanford, is we don't know the complete story of atomic energy. We don't know what to do with the waste. And for decades, we just keep putting it aside and putting it aside just like it's normal garbage. And the
Right.
reality is it's going to last thousands and thousands of years.
And it's going to kill everything.
Yeah, well, and I saw this, Helen Caldecott came to Portland when we did the Occupy Hanford event, the A15 event, and she had this really creepy movie about the generations of radioactive waste through bodies, and like how we could eat, an animal could have eaten an atomic particle that, you know, kills it, and then unknowingly, I'm just going to use an example of a dairy cow, or just a cow. Let's just call it a cow. So a cow eats the grass. The grass has radioactive waste on it. It gets some atomic particles in it. It's maybe sick or not doing well, so the farmer decides just to go ahead and slaughter it for meat. So they slaughter it for meat. They sell it to McDonald's. McDonald's sells it to some lady as a burger. The lady eats it. The atomic particle then goes into her. If she gets sick, she dies. She gets buried, you know, and then that atomic particle still lives in that gravesite. I mean, she was talking about going to conventions with grave diggers about how to deal with atomic waste in graveyards because we are so radioactive.
Wow. Well, that is actually the issue, is we are radioactive. Like, I had a woman ask me, she sent me an email and said, look, I found a great Geiger counter for $600. Should I buy it? I can hardly afford it, but I think I need it. And I'm like, we're glowing. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It does, really, honestly.
It's so funny you say that because the No Nukes Northwest, the Radcast, they got donations of Geiger counters. And I had just moved to the Oregon coast, and so Miriam was like, "Oh, you got to take one. You got to have one. We need to know. We have no citizens, you know, Geigering the coastline," and on and on and on. So I said, "Sure, you know, I would do it." And it was fun. A really good friend of mine, Richard Wood, came, and he went and he Geigered all of the like the fish holes, the places, you know, where people gut the fishes and they throw it in like a gutter. And I don't know how else to describe it. There's like a station at the docks where you can clean out your fish, and it goes into a big tanker, and then they take that tanker away as waste. And that thing was just shooting off the charts. Like, that totally lit the Geiger off. And he went on to some different boats, and because this was when they were still, you know, talking about the idea that tuna might be radioactive, you know, because they live in the stream that goes to Japan. I mean, it goes right through Japan and then comes through Newport, Oregon. So anyway, so that was so convincing at that point about how radioactive our fish were. But then we set the Geiger counter up at my house, and, you know, again, you can put it inside. It doesn't matter because atomic particles will go pretty much through anything but maybe cement. But, you know, it goes through the windows, it goes through your walls kind of thing. So you can just set this Geiger counter up, and it just counts. It just keeps counting. And so after, like, maybe, 24 hours, you just start to hear it in the background, just this click, 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 click. And you just start to realize that, there's an atomic atmosphere around us. And, of course, you can have that defense that that's natural and it's part of the sun. And the rest of us know how much that's bullshit. Yeah,
the sun does not make a Geiger counter go off. And, you know, actually, after I interviewed Thaston last week, Thaston Ricklin from the Marshall Islands interviewed with me, and he was talking about what happened on the islands and for the 10-year experience, like what happened to the people and the culture. I got off that interview and realized we didn't need it. That was World War III. The atomic testing was World War III. And we are still living with it. I mean, we don't need this whole thing. I heard so many people say, oh, we've averted World War III by not electing Clinton. We've already done that. We're done. We're cooked. I mean, the issue is, are we going to be responsible citizens, face this, and demand science to really start to address the medical issues that it's causing and to look for real solutions instead of twisting like pretzels, denying that it's happened? And this gets into something that you and I were talking about, and I talk about this all the time. It's the gaslighting. It's the brainwashing, the idea that we are being told the truth. I mean, the fact that, I mean, and then I guess there's that bigger question. Does it really matter? Does it really matter whether we know these facts or not? Because we're not in control. That's the
Well,
point of the Standing Rock thing, is to tell us, shut up, you can't do anything.
well, so I went to school and studied journalism before digital media. I mean, back in the 1990s, which I do think makes a difference. Journalism changed a lot just in the turn of the century, but the idea behind journalism is that there's more than one truth, that there's always several truths to things, and that a true journalist is going to try to get you as many facts as possible of as many truths as possible so that the reader can decipher for themselves what truth best fits their perception. And before my life, the government understood the power of that. I believe that they started to understand the power of media during World War II, and we see a lot of government propaganda that came out in the 1950s, and we're allowed to call it propaganda now, because now we can go back in hindsight and see about how they were trying to get a culture of people to believe the same thing. But now we look back and we call it propaganda because they had one way of seeing things that they wanted the people to see, and so they only showed them that one way. That's what I see happening today. Today when I watch the news or I read the paper, it's not telling me facts. It's telling me the facts they want me to know, to think the way they want me to think. I can't watch TV because I feel brainwashed. And this happened the most in my adult life when I lived in the Tri-Cities in Richland, Washington, because I read the paper every day when I drank my coffee, and every day it was some pro-Hanford argument. It didn't matter if it leaked. It didn't matter if people died. It didn't matter what the situation was, how grave it was. It was always minimalized and always simplified, and always at the end, it was always said, everything's okay. Everything's safe. Don't worry about it.
No harm to human health. No immediate harm to. This is the twisting. This is how these psychopaths, they really are sociopaths. There is no regard. I mean, I think collectively they just checked out emotionally a long time ago. Like, it's beyond comprehension that our government officials are so coerced that they are willing to be silent as they fund things that will kill our planet.
So yes, and I agree, and I think that is. I think we're, you call it World War III, and I call it the world's largest sellout. I feel like people aren't thinking and doing what they think is right because they're so caught in the moment of their paychecks and their own lifestyles that they're afraid, and they don't want to speak out, or they don't want to jeopardize their careers because money is tight and times are hard, and it's been like that for the last decade or so. And so people, that's the like the thread in our culture right now is it's okay to be a reporter for a company that you maybe don't agree with and maybe silences you because it pays you well and you're lucky that you have that job as a reporter. And what I've noticed in the last 5 years is the people demanding more. And what I mean by that is, like, when the Dakota pipeline was at that crucial height, around Thanksgiving, where we think, where they're trying to kill the water protectors with the freezing water and the rubber bullets. And all of the news is telling us it's not happening. All of the news was saying, that the water protectors had started illegal fires and that there was this violence and, the people.
A few hundred people, a few hundred, not 15, 20,000.
But because of the network of people who I've become friends with in the last decade, and because of social media, I knew people who were there, who were actual boots on the ground. So I wasn't watching ABC News or CNN or any of that crap. I was watching my friends' live stream cell phones in their hands as they're being pretty much murdered or attempted murder in the middle of nowhere of Dakota. I mean, so when people called me or talked to me about the protests and they said, well, that didn't happen, I could be like, I saw it with my own eyes. How can you question a video that was live that we were all watching, and that gave me the confidence and the integrity to just not even listen to that ignorance. You know what I mean? And I felt the same way about the election. It's like at this point in time, it comes down to each individual of what media do you buy into? What do you listen to for your news? And why do you believe that? And if you believe it because it's on mainstream TV, you need to question yourself, because since the 1970s, our public TVs have been bought out by sponsors,
Well, they're mostly run by a few corporations. But I venture to say that our listeners are that small group of people who already get that. You know what I mean? They're listening to UCY TV. You know what I mean? They're listening to us. Mm-hmm. And really, this station is phenomenal in the information it brings you. I mean, it has a whole variety of shows that have completely different hosts that have a whole different take on their subset of news that they're interested in. That is real media. That's real. You know what I mean? And a lot of Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but also the other reality is that no one gets paid.
Right.
Like, I'm sure that everyone that works with your radio and through your communications are doing it because they're so passionate and care so much about it. They're not doing it for the money. And that's the difference, Lonnie. That's the difference between, say, you and someone who's working for a public radio station, or not public, but a corporate, or I don't know how you would, a corporate
like
radio
NPR
station.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Even NPR, I call NPR National Propaganda Radio. Like,
me too. Quite anything that's like of a large, that's how I like rule it out. If it's large, if it's been around for more than like 10 years, if the people get paid, that's like the first question I want to know. Did this journalist, are they getting paid to do this? Because the other question, or the other statement about that is, all of those water protectors who went usually had to pay out of their own pocket, or they raised money with their friends and family so they could go.
Right.
I mean, most people went into debt to go and protect our waters. And they went into debt to take their phones and be able to be the press. And even with their press passes, their legal press passes, at their legal, protest, they still were being attacked. They still didn't have that legal right. And that's our constitutional right, to have journalists are protected. And they're not anymore. Independent journalists are not protected anymore.
Well, I mean, but nobody, when you start arresting journalists, it's a bad system. It's a bad state of affairs in the country, because that means that nobody's protected. If a journalist cannot be protected, we're all being bombarded by daily visions of our government bombing innocent people in foreign countries with our tax dollars. Attempt to call up Congress and say, hey, we need to defund those bombings. That will never happen. We are their subjects now. And anybody who gets elected into office is the subjects of the people who's running the government. I mean, what the Trump nation is exposing with these people that he's appointing is he's just putting in all the snakes. I mean, Mitch McConnell's wife is going to run she's going to gut our educational department.
Well, sure, because stupid people are way easier to fool, We don't want smart people.
What are they going to do with masses
for themselves,
What do you think they're going to do with the masses of people in the street, though, Heidi? I mean, when people lose their Section 8 housing, the reason we have Section 8, it's such a catastrophic system, is people need their Section 8 housing to live because they don't make enough money to live. And it is a renter's market. I mean, the owner's market. The owner's rent has skyrocketed in this country because it's all about let's make the most money possible, and we're going to take it from the government. I mean,
I agree. I agree completely with you that it's. I believe that it's been an atrocity of how we've treated each other in the last decade, and I know it's going to get worse. The economy has been. Sadly, the more tighter the economy gets, the tighter people are with their money, and the less generous people are. The more scared people are, and I just, I work in the education industry, I guess you could call it, and I help families and children. And what I know about that is that there's three states of the mind. There's three levels of thinking. There's the executive level of thinking. Usually people are in the, I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to be a little redundant in the case you don't. So people have this executive level, and that's when all their needs are met and everything's fine. And when you're in an executive state of thinking, you worry about the other person, you make sure everybody's needs are met. It's a more healthy or balanced kind of state of mind, state of thinking. And then there's the emotional, and emotional is when, you maybe get caught up on your feelings, like I don't feel like I can do this right now, I don't feel good, I don't, and it makes it a little harder for you to think, and a little harder for you to relate to things, because you're caught up into your own emotions and you can't really see clearly. And then there's the last state of mind, which is called flight or fight. And when you're in flight or fight, you can't really be logical. You can't really think things out. People can tell you things that make sense, but you're so upset and you're so fearful you can't really make sense of things. So what I think the media does is it purposely puts the society in a state of fight or flight. It makes us all feel like it's the end of the world and we have to do something right now, and or we have to leave, and people can't stay in their relationships, and they can't be good parents, and kids can't be good students, and everybody kind of flails around, and it's very difficult to get your needs met when you're in that state. And so as a society, if we're all living in fear and we're all acting in this fight or flight state, no one's making good decisions. No one's being logical. Everyone's doing things out of fear. They're not doing it because it makes sense, and I kind of feel that's what happened with the election. People voted for Trump out of fear of what Hillary was, without thinking of the logic of what Trump would do to her. You know what I mean? So in a sense, we kind of need we need some therapy. I think.
Yeah.
We need the therapy.
We do. I was actually hearing this morning, we're all in this big frenzy about Pizzagate, right? I actually heard Maria Keller this morning, and I'm going to verify. I'm going to do some research in it. But she was saying that this whole story about the Pizzagate was planted by the Trump campaign to knock Hillary Clinton down, and people really believe it. I mean, look, David Icke has been reporting on the pedophile ring that has been going around the world for 20, 30 years. But why did it become an issue now? And why did the overlords allow Trump to get into office? I mean, this is where the gaslighting works. See, we're just like these little peons, and we're scratching the surface of trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And it's only because, for myself, full disclosure, it's because I'm realizing we're completely radiated. I mean, I was born near the very first nuclear meltdown, and I had no idea. I lived near a nuclear power plant all my life. I had no idea. That same power plant, San Onofre, the 5 freeway, the land adjacent to the 5 freeway is so radioactive, the Navy will not take it back. How many people are affected by that? Millions of people up and down that freeway, day in, day out.
Yeah, it is, Lonnie. When you start to talk about the radioactive world we live in, it's frightening. It really is. And also just the lack of responsibility from the nuclear industry. And that does go to our government. I mean, our government owns the nuclear industry, and we bought it as security system, and it was sold to us as a defense system to keep us safer from the Nazis. And then now they turned that defense system into power to get us cheap power in the 80s and 90s, through the oil crisis. And then we started to realize in 1979 is when the actual documents started to getting released that we really were being poisoned, and that's one of the main reasons people were dying. And then, then cancer started getting really widespread. Now nuclear is medicine. Now we need it for medicine to cure the diseases that they've caused.
And people die from it. It's not even effective. American doctors are refusing to use it now.
Oh, yeah. It's super controversial. And when you go to the Tri-Cities, it's filled with students, filled with nuclear science students learning how to X-ray, learning chemo. There's lots of ways that we use nuclear science.
Well, Heidi, there's another way that they've really avoided the system, is that they have really co-opted the scientists. There is kind of a ongoing feud, at least on the YouTube community, about Helen Caldicott and Dr. Chris Busby, and how they have said that they think there's spent fuel in number 4 or number 3. I don't remember which one it is, because that's what the scientists at TEPCO were saying, right? If you look at the pictures, it's very dubious that there's anything left there. Those plants blew up. Like, how can you possibly believe it? But because they're scientists and because they are considered experts in the field, and they're considered, they can testify, they can go into court as legal experts. If they deviate from their sentences on what the actual scientific proof says, that disqualifies them as scientists. So they can't come out publicly and say, this is a bunch of bullshit what those scientists at TEPCO are telling us. So then it creates this whole sense of doubt among the populace who look to them for issues and answers as to, like, why are you guys lying to us? Then they're considered liars. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, this is part of the co-opting. This is part of the brainwashing and what it has caused. And true to form, the fight or flight. People are angry. They're bitter. There's a bitter argument going on. And and what it has done is it sets the anti-nuclear movement way back, because we've formed a circular firing squad amongst each other. And it is directly related to the brainwashing and the gaslighting, and and the desperation that anybody who really digs into this knows that our grandchildren, are 7 generations from now for humanity, probably will not happen. That's the hard cold reality, is unless we come up with some ingenious scientific discovery that we have not discovered right now, humanity is freaking toast.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you. And I think it just goes back again to, what is your trusted source? If a scientist is getting paid, then I would not trust them, especially if they're getting paid by TEPCO. You know what I mean? Those are the first questions are, is this person getting paid, and who's paying them? Chris Busby, does he get paid? I don't think so. I don't think so, man. I think that guy goes out on his own and has devoted himself to science himself. Same with Helen Caldicott. She doesn't get money. I mean, she gets money, but it's from people like us. Do you see what I'm saying?
And from selling her books and being around and
selling her books.
She does get paid as an expert, a scientific expert, like when she's called in to testify before boards and things. But see, this is the point here. The whole concept, this is the other part of it, is the people who are really angry are people struggling financially. So there's this whole, it's this whole idea that the scientists have to accept the bullshit lies that TEPCO's dishing out if they want to be considered to maintain their scientific integrity, at least publicly. They cannot.
And you could say the same about professors. We could say the same about journalists. I mean, there is an industrial complex here, and it's a triangle, And at the top of it, you're going to have the dudes, and I imagine they're men, that are loaded, who don't give a crap about people. And then all they want is to make money. And that's kind of Trump. The bottom line is, how much money are you going to get made? It's not about how many lives. It's not about who gets displaced. It's not about anything. The bottom line is about money. Now, that's not my bottom line. That's not what I care about. So you're not going to be able to buy me. And that's why I'm poor. Because I'm not going to go work for Lockheed Martin, or I'm not going to go work for GE. You see what I'm saying? Like,
I get
we
you. That's
as individuals, we make these choices. Now, I maybe am in a place of financial burden, so that causes my mind to go into that fight or flight often, because I'm worried about the well-being of my family. But I often sit with myself and meditate, and I sit and I hold into my heart that everything is okay. And everything will be okay, and that the world is a more peaceful place and a more caring place, a more nurturing place than what they want us to believe. And I think that's my strength. Now, some people would say it's my denial. They would say, oh, well, you're too busy denying what's really happening, and so it keeps going on. I disagree. I feel that grounds me. It gives me a peace of mind And I think that peace of mind then lets my mind go up to an executive state. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's the power of ourselves that we all need to do and take care of ourselves, because then we can start really seeing things with clarity and sensing when someone's totally telling us a lie, and make an educated decision and maybe change our job, maybe work for a different company, maybe we start our own company, maybe we only work with like-minded people. You're not going to see that or know those like-minded people until you get that calmness in your own soul, you know, that you will attract it. And you're a perfect example, Lonnie, of me meeting you. And here we are talking now today about the truths that we know, and people are listening to it, and they're going to say, oh, that's the truth I know. And I just believe it'll be contagious and spread.
Well, that's why in my intro I say happiness is resistance, because really if you get stuck in that misery, you're not going to be expansive. You're not going to find the gifts that this is why I am the eternal optimist. Like, I really believe we need to push back and take science back from the murderers, because that's what they are. They're genociders. They have been murdering our planet, and scientists have been held hostage. And I will defend Helen Caldicott and Chris Busby, because they really have devoted their lives to getting the truth out about what the nuclear industry, the harm that they've done. And unfortunately for the nuclear scientists, they have only, like our medical doctors in the United States, they've only been given a little tiny drop of what the real facts are. And they have been convinced through their training that that's the facts. I mean, it's a pervasive thing that allows a very small few hundred people and their families to thrive, and the rest of us get to scratch it out. I mean, it's beyond comprehension to me. We are on a precipice, I really believe this, on our planet of whether we are going to make it as a species or not. And we haven't seen, in a way, maybe this Trump's election was sort of inevitable. Maybe we had to come to this point for us to decide that we were going to enjoy our lives and live life and really embrace it, because we've been hobbling along since 9/11, since the Bush crime family basically, you know, thrusted the Unpatriot Act on us, right? What is going to happen with Trump is he's going to push us. He is going to destroy so much of what we have taken for granted in this country that we're going to have to rebuild. So maybe that's...
Well, hopefully that creates some unity. I mean, what I've seen going on at the pipeline, at the protests, was this incredible unity. I mean, they say this is the largest gathering of the native tribes in hundreds of years, you know, and to see the power of the people come together like that. Now, I experienced something similar to that with Occupy in Portland, a much smaller scale, but at the same time, at that event, you know, I met so many powerful people, and in the last 5 years, lots of things have changed because of those connections. And I believe the same thing happened in Dakotas. People met each other. People met each other face-to-face, not on social media, and they got to know each other. They froze together. They ate together. They danced together. They sang together. They prayed together. You know, all of those things made for a tighter community of the strong unity, and that is the power of the people. When I was on social media on Facebook, I would see, you know, rumors or whatever that people were sharing off of mainstream media, and then I could rebuttal with facts of people who were there. And not only was it facts from people there, it was people who I've met in person, who I've shook hands and I've hugged. I mean, that power of knowing each other is huge.
That's why they killed the Occupy. That is exactly why they killed the Occupy movement. That is the reason they didn't want to change in the status quo, which brings me to this question. I have two questions to ask you about. You keep going back to the Standing Rock. I am actually completely blown away that we have this huge movement of people to stop a pipeline from going under the Missouri River, when all of those Native American tribes, almost everything east of the Mississippi, is contaminated with the, I mean, worst contaminant possibly ever created. Nobody says, Jack, you as soon as you look at them, their eyes glaze over. But they're willing to talk about oil. They're willing to talk about the oil because that's the good boogeyman to hate.
They do talk about, I mean, you have to remember they're the first victims of uranium. They are, the uranium mining, the travel of uranium, the manufacturing of nukes. I mean, the native tribes took a horrendous hit.
Are still taking it.
And still taking it, of course. And not only was it just of their getting their land stolen from them or treaties being molested, but what really, another way that it got hit and that I felt in eastern Washington was the native tribes for hundreds, thousands of years, they hunted and they fished and they gathered the food from the environment. And they continued to do that, but that food was super toxic. It was super toxic. The fish were toxic. The elk were toxic. The berries were toxic. And no one ever discussed that. No one ever told them, and they got sick and they died. Now, again, when I think of native tribes, I think of them as being in the state of mind of fight or flight. And they're in such a state of flight and fight that that's how Standing Rock happened. Somehow the fight got so big for this one tribe's fight, which isn't really one tribe, actually, it's several. But this one fight became so big, and this Standing Rock didn't start with the DAPL. It started with the what's it called, the other pipeline.
The XL pipeline.
This is just a cousin. These are cousins. So this is
it's coming. You do know that Trump asked Canada to resubmit their documents to put that pipeline in. He's going to approve it as soon as he gets in. He's already said that.
I'm sure there's going to be so many environmental travesties. I mean, there already is, and there will be more. And the only defense we have is each other. And the only defense we have is to communicate with one another about these atrocities, about these crimes. When we see it, when we hear it's about it going to happen, the best thing we can do is tell each other and communicate that, because for decades and generations we've trusted the news to tell us. The nightly news is supposed to be telling us what's going on, and they stopped doing that a long time ago. So in a traditional culture, we would have lots of siblings, and we'd have these big families, and we would come home for Christmas, and we'd sit around the table, and we would tell each other about these crimes. Well, we don't have that now. Now we don't have families. We don't gather like that. And we lost that tradition, and actually that's hurting us as a people. We need to have these traditions of where we get together with each other, where we get together with our neighbors, where we hang out with people who maybe aren't our favorite people, but we have some things in common, and we can sit at the same table and eat together and discuss our politics, discuss these changes, because that's our power. Our power is communication and truth. And if we're not talking to each other, and we're sitting at home in front of our TVs by ourselves, and we're only buying into the brainwashing that they're selling us, we're not going to get out of this. There's going to be no progression. The only progression is to turn the TV off, get outside yourself, go to these different protests, go to these different places, educate yourself, and then communicate it with one another. And when someone hurts your feelings and disagrees with you, don't flip out. Don't go into the fight or flight.
Right. That's really, and I would suggest that people start with the art galleries, because art moves your soul. Don't go into the movie theaters where you just don't talk to anybody, but start looking at museums and start expanding your mind about what it really means. It is very important for us to choose our lives. I mean, we really are, as a species, think about it, life has never been easy. As a human species, we're a frail creature. We want peace more than we want anything else, which is why we're willing to be ruled by oligarchs, why women are willing to be beaten up. I mean, we have over 800,000 children we know in this country being abducted every year in this country, our country. Almost 800,000 children, and that is not a national cry out. Why? Because we want peace. We don't want to have to counter the people that are actually perpetrating the international sex trade, because everybody feels guilty about their sexuality. Who knows what you're doing in your bedroom, and that's not really right. I mean, the whole thing is just an invasion of our hearts. Not an invasion of our privacy, it's an invasion of our hearts. And it is up to us to choose every day we're going to take it back and decide that our, quote, insignificant, unquote, whether it matters or not, we must follow our hearts. And Thomas Ackerman says this all the time so beautifully. Do the right thing. We have to do the right thing. And we don't always have to be right. We don't need to be right. We
But
do
if it
have
feels
to.
right, but if it feels right, at least you can stand with integrity and say,
Right.
I did this because it's what it felt right to me. This made sense to me. And the thing about like Standing Rock, those folks go out, and I have family in Dakotas, and they're white, and they're going to sit and talk about the worms and the vagrants and these protesters who just come for a free place to
Well, you mean
sleep.
they call them worms? What are you talking about, worms?
Yeah. They say evil, awful things about the water protectors, and I have to kind of laugh, and I'm like, okay, these people are going in debt. They're in freezing cold conditions. They're willing to risk their lives, and they're out there to protect your drinking water while you sit fat in your heated house, eating Cheetos, and you're going to call them worms? That's where I can stand with integrity in that conversation and be like, that's funny. That's funny to me, And they even said, oh, they get paid. They're paid protesters. And I could laugh at that because I know so truly in my heart that that's ridiculous. That's outlandish. That's not true.
Well, it's kind of like people saying George Soros is funding these protests, these spontaneous protests.
Yeah.
It's so not true. I mean, I know for a fact my daughter joined in on the protest in Portland spontaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not, and the reason it got out of hand is because there was no organizers. There really was nobody paying for it. It was just a spontaneous thing, and people get out of hand when you have mobs rule. What do they do?
People are pissed. People are pissed. I feel like breaking things, and I'm an incredibly peaceful person, and it makes me want to break things. So, of course, if I was an 18-year-old kid who, didn't have any sort of, conflict resolution training or any sort of peaceful experiences, of course you're going to throw a rock through the window. What the hell is a rock through the window considering that we're getting a pipeline to go across our country and leak in every river? You know what I mean? We have to keep it in perspective, what's worthy of getting angry about? And why is
Heide,
angry
you're
bad?
making me laugh. Conflict resolution skills. That's such an adult term even. It's just so hilarious. But this is the thing. We're talking about the effect of the nuclear liars, and it's not just nuclear, it's the whole technology, it's the whole, we wake up as Americans, we wake up every single day. As Americans, we wake up every single day knowing our government is bombing innocent people. We wake up knowing every single day that our government is spending how much? $1 million a day on Israel? Or is it $1 billion? Some outrageous number. We know for a fact that we are storing food that is wasting in waste bins while there's people starving and freezing to death in our own streets. 800,000 of our children are missing every year. Elderly people are in institutions being abused on a daily basis. And there is no national emergency to say, we got to get our values straight. And we talk about making an America great again while the guy hires Goldman Sachs, Wall Street investors, and a man who says he doesn't believe in who grew up on public housing, doesn't believe in it. He's going to run the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I mean, that's what HUD means, Housing and Urban Development. So Americans really need to get a grip on who we are and what we are. It's a very difficult process here, though, in our country, because it's we're the first nation where we just threw a bunch of people together and said, okay, go get along. And let's forget the fact that we have oppressed and made slavery the hallmark of our foundation for the first 150 years of our history. So,
right. But to me, this is not a national problem, Lonnie. This is international. Like, the pipeline was funded more by international banks than it was by national banks.
True.
There are other foreign entities have more money in polluting, contaminating, and raping America for our resources than anyone. And so it's the banker or the stock market guy or whoever, you know what I mean, who's selling this out. This is the biggest sellout ever. And it's up to us as individuals on whether or not we want to sell out or not. You know, and it's going to be a process. And you said go to art museums, and I think that people should go out for coffee. You know, imagine the power of the speakeasy in the 1920s. You know, we need to bring back the speakeasies in America where we come together, we gather, we sit around a table, and we talk about these issues and talk about what we do in our jobs and talk about, you know, other ways. And it's the only way we're going to find a way out of this.
That's a brilliant idea. And I'm going to implement that right here in Eugene, because I know that's one of the things here in Eugene. People, unless in Eugene, at least, I don't know about other communities, but here, unless you're willing to agree with their point of view, they don't really want to share conversation with you. They kind of look like, I got involved with a community action group. It was a political community action, Community Action Alliance of Lane County. And when I first got engaged, I was talking about grouping up and creating a coalition to revoke the Patriot Act. I think that's the biggest detriment to our country ever. And they looked at me like I was like I had just jumped off a cliff. Like I was like, that was not on their agenda. They wanted to talk about the homelessness, the food issue. They wanted to talk about the political parties, but talking about forming a coalition to actually let's move the ball down the line before this thing gets out of control.
You were looking at a very big picture, though. That's a very big picture, you know, and sounds like they were very focused and small, you know.
Yeah, it was actually. That's a good insight, because that is exactly what it was. They didn't want to have to get involved.
You were using your executive mind, and they were using their fight or flight.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the executive mind, is someone who can look at the big picture, who can see like what it's going to become. But if you're just worried about the next meal and you're just worried about where you're going to live, then you're very so stuck in that flight or fight, and you can't get up out of that state of thinking, you know? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's a very good insight, because, you know, this is the interesting thing. I've often said this, and I said this to Kevin many times, like I'm the perfect post-ignorance person, because I moved from Los Angeles to a very small town, very provincial little town here, and I bring my LA thinking into a town where I want to have a bigger picture thing. But right. because in LA I drowned, there were so many people, there was no voice. So when you come to a small community, your voice can be heard. And I was kind of stunned that they do not. We have every year we have a Hiroshima celebration about the day that the bomb was dropped. The small Japanese community gets together, they come and talk about it, but do not talk about Fukushima, which is still a problem. They consider that to be very rude. They were very upset with me the first year. Right, and that's the censorship
that we're giving to each other. That's the self-censorship that we're doing to ourselves. And I think that's why it's important to listen to people even if we don't agree with them, because it's important to speak your mind. And so if someone really believes in what they believe in, but it's not the same as you, like we'll use Fukushima as an example, okay? I think the Japanese country was victim to America with Fukushima, because after Hiroshima, after we bombed them, we came back to Japan and said, we're sorry we did that. How about if we give you some really great electricity makers, and we help your country with these great, machines, which were really reactors, and it was really nuclear. I mean, I don't know if Japanese culture really fully understood that was nuclear science. And so they took it and they put it there, and they didn't know the risks. Those were GE reactors. Those were American-made reactors. There's like, I think 300 of them in Japan. And so when Fukushima happened, why wouldn't there be this national embarrassment? This like, damn it, we let them do it to us again. You know? That's how I feel. I feel like we had no business selling them nuclear reactors. We had no business doing that. And now that they have the nuclear reactors and the radiation, now we're going over with our nuclear medicine. You know, so they got sold out into this system just like the rest of us. And
that's
they're victims.
An interesting perspective.
You don't want to talk about it. If you're raped, you don't want to talk about it. You know, especially if you got raped and then you went out and got raped again. It's like you don't want to talk about it. Because
well, not only that, people always blame the person who got raped. It's always about victim. That is, in fact, a large portion of the gaslighting. It's always about, and the propaganda, it's always about victim shaming. It's always about making the victim the reason that this crime happened to them.
Right. So when you talk to GE about Fukushima, they'll say, well, they should have known better. They were on a fault line. They should have gotten their filters renewed and had them raised above the flood line. They should have done this. They should have done that. Maybe if they didn't wear their black bra, it would have never happened. You know what I mean? It's the victim's fault.
Yeah. Well, speaking of victims, I do want to give our listeners the phone number for Elliot Mainzer at the Bonneville Power Administration. That number, I hope that everybody has their pencil and paper because I'm attempting to give this number out every single show, 5 days a week, if I can get it in. Elliot Mainzer is the person at the Bonneville Power Administration who has the authority to shut down the Columbia Generating Station, which is sitting on an active earthquake fault less than 15 miles away from Hanford. And because they built it there on an earthquake fault, it is a clear and present danger, not only to North America, but to the entire Northern Hemisphere. So it needs to be shut down immediately. Let me give you his phone number. His number is 800-282-3713. That's 800-282-3713. And call him and say, look, based on the current earthquake activity around the planet, Columbia Generating Station is a threat, and we need to have it shut down immediately. So
excellent. That's so great. I'm so glad.
That's my 2-minute plug on shutting down the Columbia Generating Station.
Yeah, give him a conversation. Invite him out for coffee.
Yeah, good idea. Invite him out for coffee. He's actually right in Portland. I mean, maybe I should make an appointment to go visit him.
I will go with you. I would love to do that.
Okay,
yeah,
well, I think I'll call him and see if we can go make an appointment and invite him out to coffee and say, hey, let's go have a conversation about this.
Yeah, sounds good.
See if he wants to quit his job yet, because that's what it would entail. I mean, the minute he decided to order the Columbia Generating Station closed, I venture to say that his car would have an accident.
Well, it's sad to say, but it could be true. And sadly, if he doesn't close it, then he might have a legacy of nuking the whole Northwest. So I guess he gets to choose what he wants to go down remembered as, the dude who loses his job or the guy who, took out the Northwest.
Yeah, well, not just the Northwest. It's going to be everything. Our breadbasket is going to be gone. The wind blows west to east. So, we can't play around with this anymore, and we have to stop believing the nuclear liars. They are liars. It's a failed experiment, and they're just using our tax dollars. It's not even a sustainable industry. They use our tax dollars for it. So, Heidi, we have 30 seconds left. I want to thank you for joining us on the Age of Fission. I hope you'll come back and we can talk more about Hanford. You and I really wanted to talk about this gaslighting thing, so thank you for engaging in that conversation.
Thanks for having me, Lonnie. It was great, and I'll come back again for sure.
I hope so. And please, everyone, put your courage feet on. Please do call Elliot Mainzer at 800-282-3713 and tell them to shut down the Columbia Generating Station. Our actions do matter. Take action. Do what you can do, and we'll talk with you tomorrow. Take care.